Nothing personal, just business. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud as I slid the envelope across the polished conference table. Richard Keller, Horizon Veterinary Partners Regional Director, stared at me with that practiced corporate smile that never reached his eyes. Your resignation? After 23 years, Dr. Mitchell? Over a standard market adjustment? His voice carried the perfect blend of surprise and condescension. No, I replied, maintaining eye contact. This is my 30-day notice of opening Lakeside Animal Hospital, just 5 minutes from here. The blood drained from his face. Behind him, the company lawyer stopped typing mid-sentence. You can't do that. The non-compete clause clearly states, I cut him off with a calm I didn't know I possessed. A clause that doesn't exist in any document I signed. I placed my own legal folder on the table. My lawyer confirmed it yesterday. 23 years of my life in this clinic. Thousands of animals treated. Countless tears shed with owners saying goodbye to their beloved pets. All reduced to market adjustment and operational efficiency by a man who never held a suffering animal in his arms. As I stood to leave his office, my mind drifted to how it all began, 3 weeks ago, when my world turned upside down. Flashback, the acquisition. The morning had started like any other. I arrived at Oak Valley Animal Clinic at 7:30 a.m., coffee in hand, greeting Nancy at reception, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn for 15 years. Dr. Wilson wants to see everyone in the conference room at 8, she said, her expression unusually tense. Dr. Wilson, our 76-year-old founder and owner, had been hinting at retirement for years. When we gathered, his usual warm smile was replaced with a solemn expression. The sale to Horizon Veterinary Partners was finalized last night, he announced, his voice slightly trembling. They've assured me they'll maintain our practice values and take care of you all. I felt a chill despite the warm May morning. Corporate acquisitions of veterinary practices had been sweeping across the country. Colleagues at other clinics had warned me, standardized care protocols, efficiency metrics, upselling requirements. My parents' voices echoed in my mind, their small family hardware store swallowed by a national chain when I was in college. They promised nothing would change, my father had said bitterly. 6 months later, they closed the store and laid off everyone who'd worked there for decades. I pushed the memory aside. Maybe this would be different. 1 week later, the cut, your profit margins are too low, Richard Keller declared, tapping his tablet. We need to align your compensation with industry standards. Translation: after 23 years of dedicated service, my salary would be cut by 40%. I understand this is a transition period, I replied, maintaining my professional composure while my heart raced. When would these changes take effect? Next pay cycle. We'll need your decision by Friday. I studied him, his expensive suit, his practice-neutral expression, the MBA diploma prominently displayed on his new office wall. He'd never stayed up all night with an emergency surgery. Never handwritten sympathy cards to grieving pet owners. Never built relationships that spanned multiple generations of families and their animals. Walking out of his office, I found Nancy at reception, her eyes red-rimmed. You too? I asked quietly. She nodded. 30% cut plus reduced hours. At my age, with my grandchildren's college funds to think about. Her voice trailed off. Behind her, the waiting room was filled with familiar faces, Mrs. Hensley with her ancient golden retriever Max, who I'd been treating since he was a puppy. The Garcia family with their 3 rescue cats, Mr. Johnson with his tortoise Methuselah, who'd likely outlive us all. These weren't just clients. They were my extended family. Flashback, early career. I remembered my first day at Oak Valley, fresh out of vet school with student loans weighing me down. Dr. Wilson had taken a chance on me, even though my interview had been interrupted twice by emergency calls. That's the reality of this work, he'd said, inviting me to assist with a critically injured dog. It's messy, it's emotional, it's exhausting. But if you have the heart for it, there's nothing more rewarding. He'd been right. Through my divorce 10 years ago, this clinic had been my sanctuary. When my daughter Emily left for college 3 years ago, these animals and their people had filled the emptiness of my suddenly quiet home. Meeting with Michael. It always starts the same. Michael Roberts, our newest veterinarian, told me over lunch the next day. At 42, he'd already worked for two corporate chains before joining us 6 months ago. First comes cost cutting, then efficiency improvements, then pressure to upsell services that most animals don't need. And the care quality? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Everything becomes about numbers, he replied, pushing his salad around. How many patients you see per hour? How many additional services you sell? How much revenue you generate? His eyes met mine. That's why I left. Got tired of being told to recommend unnecessary dental procedures to meet monthly targets. I thought about my own daughter, who'd chosen environmental law over veterinary medicine despite her love for animals. The corporatization scares me, she'd explained. I'd rather fight for animals in court than be forced to compromise their care for profit. The critical moment, the turning point came a week later. Mrs. Whitaker brought in Chairman Meow, her 17-year-old Maine Coon who'd been my patient since he was a kitten. At 72, Mrs. Whitaker lived on a fixed income, carefully budgeting for her beloved cat's care. He's been eating well, moving comfortably, she explained as I examined him. Just our regular arthritis check. According to the new corporate protocols displayed prominently on the computer screen, I was required to recommend a full senior panel costing nearly $500, tests we'd run just 2 months earlier with normal results. Is this really necessary so soon? Mrs. Whitaker asked, concern evident in her eyes. Before I could answer, Richard appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by some profit-sensing radar. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Richard Keller, Regional Director. He introduced himself with that same practiced smile. I couldn't help noticing that we haven't scheduled Chairman's senior wellness package today. What followed was masterful corporate pressure, subtle implications that skipping these tests was neglectful, mentions of early detection, and finally a special one-time discount that still exceeded what these tests should actually cost. I watched Mrs. Whitaker's expression shift from confusion to guilt to resignation as she finally agreed, her hands gripping her purse a little tighter. After she left, Richard pulled me aside. Dar Mitchell, when we recommend a protocol, we expect our veterinarians to support it fully. Those tests are unnecessary right now, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. This isn't about healthcare. It's about revenue. Your personal attachment to clients is clouding your professional judgment, he countered dismissively. The words struck like a physical blow. In my world, that personal attachment was the cornerstone of good medicine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Mrs. Whitaker's face, the trust in her eyes replaced by uncertainty. I thought about my own mother, also a widow on a fixed income, and how vulnerable she would be to such tactics. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The decision. You should, Dr. Wilson said when I called to tell him I was considering opening my own practice. His voice carried the weight of regret. I would never have sold if I'd known what they really planned. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a woman possessed. I secured a lease on a former pediatrician's office just 5 minutes from Oak Valley. Equipment suppliers I'd worked with for years offered favorable terms. A local bank approved my business loan, the loan officer remembering how I'd treated her family's pets for over a decade. In the clinic, I maintained a careful silence about my plans, but word spread regardless. Patients asked pointed questions during appointments. So where exactly will your new practice be located? Mrs. Thompson asked while I examined her terrier's ear infection. I haven't finalized anything yet, I replied carefully, aware of the microphone on the computer system that had been installed as part of Horizon's quality assurance program. She lowered her voice. Well, when you do, please let me know. Max won't see anyone else. These conversations happen daily, each one strengthening my resolve and confirming I wasn't just making a career move. I was preserving a standard of care that mattered to the community. The confrontation. On my final day at Oak Valley, Brian summoned me to what he called a departure protocol meeting. I expected typical exit formalities, returning keys, signing paperwork, perhaps a cursory acknowledgement of my years of service. Instead, I found Brian seated with two strangers, Horizon's regional legal counsel and their human resources director. Before we process your departure, we need to address some concerns. Brian began formally. It's come to our attention that you may be planning to open a competing practice in violation of your employment terms. The legal counsel, a stern woman in her 50s, slid a document across the table. This is a cease and desist letter regarding any plans to practice veterinary medicine within a 20-mile radius of this facility for the period of 1 year. Which brings us back to the conference room, the envelope, and my calm declaration of independence. New Beginnings, Lakeside Animal Hospital opened its doors exactly 17 days after my departure from Oak Valley. The timeline had been ambitious, requiring round-the-clock work, temporary equipment rentals, and a skeleton crew working double shifts, but we made it happen. Michael joined as the second veterinarian. Diane, our head technician, came aboard after her hours at Oak Valley were reduced. Nancy gave her notice the day our new reception desk was installed, citing Horizon's hostile work environment in her resignation letter. Our first day was meant to be a soft opening, a chance to test systems with a handful of appointments. At 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before our official opening, I looked out the front window to an astonishing sight. A line of people and pets stretched across our small parking lot and down the sidewalk. "Did you call all these people?" Michael asked, eyes wide. "No," I said, stunned. "I only contacted a few with urgent needs." Nancy was already at the reception desk, logging into our new practice management system. "I think word got around," she said with a knowing smile. As we opened the doors, familiar faces poured in. Mrs. Whitaker with Chairman Meow, the Garcias with their rescue cats, Mr. Johnson and Ancient Methuselah, patients I'd cared for over decades. "We saw on the community Facebook page that you were opening today," explained Mrs. Peterson, her aging beagle Baxter wagging his tail. No one wanted to miss it. By lunchtime, we'd registered over 70 pets in our new system. By closing, that number had more than doubled. That evening, as we finally closed the doors after an exhausting but exhilarating day, I received a text from a former colleague still working at Oak Valley. "Emergency meeting called for tomorrow morning." Apparently, the schedule is suddenly empty. 3 months later, the email from Richard Keller arrived exactly 3 months after our opening. Requesting a meeting to discuss the veterinary landscape in Lexington, it read. By then, Lakeside was thriving, with over 800 registered patients, approximately 70% of Oak Valley's former client base. My response was simple. Available Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nothing personal, just business. When he arrived, the confidence was gone from his posture. After awkward pleasantries, he got to the point. "Horizon is prepared to offer you a partnership opportunity. We recognize the miscalculation in our approach." I looked around at the waiting room where Mrs. Whitaker sat with Chairman Meow for his regular checkup. Nancy was showing a young child how to gently pet a rabbit. Michael was explaining a treatment plan to an elderly couple, taking all the time they needed to understand. "I'm not interested in a partnership," I said finally. "But I'm curious, did you really think people would choose corporate efficiency over relationships built over decades?" He didn't answer directly. "The board didn't anticipate the community response." "That was your mistake," I said, not unkindly. "You saw patients as revenue sources. I see them as family." After he left, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the thank you cards that already covered one wall. At 53, I'd taken the biggest risk of my life and discovered I was stronger than I ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. "Mom, so proud of you for standing your ground. You're my hero." I smiled, thinking of Mrs. Whitaker's words earlier that day. "You know, Sarah, sometimes life's greatest adventures begin when someone underestimates you." Looking around at the thriving practice we'd built, filled with wagging tails, purring patients, and the team I trusted, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's creating the place you were always meant to be.